is it not appropriate to raise the question as to what is the germaneness of the gentleman's line of questioning and whether or not we're dealing with the report of Mr. Horowitz or we're dealing with the Republicans' attempt to undermine the Mueller investigation and as well to fire Attorney General Rosenstein, which they're planning to do on Friday.
The gentlelady has not stated a parliamentary inquiry. The gentleman from Ohio controls the time, and I would ask that the time be put back on the clock that was usurped by the gentlelady from Texas.
Mr. Horowitz, I want to go back to where we were just a few minutes ago. This text message that this mysterious one that was the most explosive one disappeared, refound, but the department sits on it for a month. Can we get a copy of the correspondence that you had with Mr. Rosenstein? Was there any type of, how did you communicate to the Justice Department that you had found this text message?
My agent sent it by email.
So you sent an email. Did you get
this printout, the spreadsheets? You know, of all the text, we had 120,000 or so, 100,000 lines of text.
So you didn't specify we found this one that had been missing?
I then, when we found it, I specified to the Associate Deputy Attorney General on June 8 that he ought to look at this one.
Oh, so you sent it to him last month, but then you specifically pointed out to him last week or 2 weeks ago.
Correct. When we identified it and saw it as we were going through these 100,000.
What response did he give you when you pointed it out? The most explosive text message.
Thank you for telling me about it.
Thank you for telling me that. Well, yeah, I think so, but not like, well, we need to get this to Congress like we did all the others right away.
I'd engage him on that.
Do you know if there's anything nefarious at work? Because when we got the original pages of the text, it had the prompting question from Ms. Page. It says he's not ever going to become president, right? We had that one. We've had it for months, as did you. So why didn't we get the response? All the other times we get the back and forth. This time we did it.
I think actually it goes to the technological issue that we think needs to get addressed and fixed, frankly, because what happened here is on the fourth go-round, when we were doing our quality control check on what we had done, we found an operating system or program in the phone that was.
So you think it was technical? You think it was a technical problem?
To us, that's what it appears as to why this wasn't found before May.
I'm more concerned about why Mr. Rosenstein didn't give us the information when he first got it. It seems to me he should have. Let me go to something else here. How many different investigations do you have going on right now? You're looking at Mr. Comey. You're looking at FISA, potential abuse of the FISA court process. And are you looking at the leak issue with the FBI? Have you got 3 other ones going on?
We got lots of investigations.
Well, I know, but relative to this subject, I know you got lots.
Yes, we're looking at the leak issue as well. That's ongoing.
So all 3 of those
remain ongoing.
Within ongoing investigations, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea when I'm interested in all of them, but I'm particularly interested in the FISA, potential abuse of the FISA process. Do you have any idea when that one will be complete?
I don't, Congressman. In part, as you know, a few weeks ago we were asked to broaden that and look at some additional information and issues.
Do you anticipate it taking 18 months like this Clinton investigation one did, Mr. Horowitz?
I don't anticipate it, but let me just say, if we had released this report in January, you would not have most of these text messages.
No, I understand. I mean, you got to do your work, but
I can't.
As important as it is,
that.
when you looking at the FISA potential abuse of the FISA process, will you be looking at the question of whether Mr. Rosenstein threatened staff members on the House Intelligence Committee?
I've read about that recently, and I'm certainly, as in all instances, available to take information. I only know at this point what.
But will that be within the parameters of your investigation? That question?
Frankly, I'd have to understand a little bit more about it and what occurred, and how it might connect to this, if at all, or whether it's something separate.
Will you look at the issue of why, when the dossier was taken to the FISA court, they didn't tell the court who paid for the document? Will you look at that question?
Certainly within the FISA review.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Chairman. Parliamentary
Mr. Horowitz, in the course of your investigation, will you look at the question of why, when the application was taken to the FISA court, they didn't reveal the fact that the author of the document, the author of the dossier?
Chairman, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman from Ohio controls the time.
Is it not appropriate to raise the question as to what is the germaneness of the gentleman's line of questioning and whether or not we're dealing with the report of Mr. Horowitz or we're dealing with the Republicans' attempt to undermine the Mueller investigation and as well to fire Attorney General Rosenstein, which they're planning to do on Friday?
The gentlelady has not stated
the
a
agenda.
parliamentary inquiry. The gentleman from Ohio controls the time, and I would ask that the time be put back on the clock that was usurped by the gentlelady from Texas.
I would just respond, Mr. Chairman. It's been widely understood that when the dossier was taken to the FISA court to get a secret warrant to spy on a fellow American citizen, they didn't tell the court two important facts. They didn't tell the court who paid for the document, and they didn't tell the court the guy who wrote it had been fired by the FBI. And I'm just asking, as Mr. Horowitz undergoes this important investigation, if he'll be examining those two fundamental questions.
We will take under advisement those and other questions that have been raised. And as we said with this review, if we find additional issues, we will look at those as well. And partly that's why.
Just one last question, if I could, Mr. Horowitz. When May 17th, 2017, Rod Rosenstein writes a memo outlining the scope and parameters of the special counsel investigation. On August 2nd, 2017, he writes another memo that in some way alters, amends, modifies the initial scope of the investigation. And yet we can't see that, the American people can't see that. Seems to me, if you're altering the scope of an investigation into the guy that the American people made president of the United States, we as Americans deserve to know exactly the parameters and scope of that investigation. And so will you be able to get a hold of that August 2nd memo and make that available in the course of your investigation?
Gentleman's time has expired, but you may answer the question.
I'd have to think about how that connected to our investigation and what connectivity, germaneness it would have to ours. I'm happy to consider it. I have not seen either of those memos myself. And like I said, on its face, I'm not sure the connection between that and the FISA, but I'll certainly take it under advisement, Congressman.
Mr. Horowitz, there has been a massive amount of bias documented by you in your investigation. You've concluded with recommendations that appear to just be more policies of the same policies with the FBI, the DOJ already had. You understood it was already against FBI and DOJ policy to let bias come into play in these investigations, correct?
Absolutely.
Well, you made references in your report, even quoted from unnamed but numbered prosecutors and agents. Have you given us the names of those individuals?
So we have a request for them, and we are...
So you haven't given us the names, and now you can't decide whether you're going to give them to us?
Well, let me be clear. We engaged the committee on this. We went to the FBI. The FBI raised the concern.
The answer is no, you haven't given them to us. So let me just tell you, we're here because prosecutors and agents at the DOJ have been biased, and it may have, and some of us believe you've laid out a case that bias did affect what was going on. And then you come in here and say, we're going to number these people. We're not going to let you know who they are. But let me ask you this. Have you checked to see what normally wouldn't matter, how they voted in a presidential election, except when you're investigating a nominee or a president? Do you know how they voted? Did they donate money to either of the candidates?
I have no idea how they voted, and I don't have an idea.
You're bringing this investigation in here based on and are utilizing opinions and information provided by prosecutors and agents who may be just as biased as the people that we're investigating. We just don't know because we hadn't seen their texts, we hadn't seen their emails. Normally, if putting back on my felony judge hat, if a jury is going to make a decision on guilt or innocence of a felony of say, a presidential nominee, I'm going to let them ask the jury panel, did you vote for this person? Did you give money to this person? Do you have a bumper sticker for this person? Did you put sign in their yard? Did you talk this person up? And yet you're coming in here, you don't know if these people you were relying on actually had any biases like the very ones you were investigating. Well, let me ask you this. Among the supervising special agents you referenced and the prosecutors, do you have any idea of the percentage that may have voted for Hillary Clinton?
We did not ask people who
Well, let me
voted.
tell you, I know my friend Mr. Nadler had referenced that, a big organization like that's probably just as many people supported Trump. When I heard Newt Gingrich yesterday said the fact is 97% of the people in the DOJ that donated to Democrats. 97%. So there's a good chance that the people that you're relying on did support Hillary Clinton. We don't know because you haven't asked. It's important to know who the investigators are and the people you're relying on. You mentioned in here in the report about Strzok and the relationship that he mentions with Judge Contreras. Do you know why Judge Contreras was removed from the Mike Flynn case?
I don't know why he was recused.
Or is that something you would investigate?
It's not within the scope of this investigation, as it
Well, I'm
indicated.
going to reinforce the request for the identities of the supervising special agent, the prosecutors and agents that were only identified by numbers, and ask who they contributed to, if anyone, in the last 2 cycles. Now, in your report, you said the SSA told us that the FBI did not consider Pagliano as a subject or someone to prosecute in connection. But this guy set up the unsecured server, as I understood it. This is a guy that you had a lay-down case, or the DOJ did, and yet they don't use that leverage. They don't treat him like they did Manafort or any of these other people. The DOJ had leverage, and this is where bias came into play. They didn't go after him. You said the SSA told us he believed Gambetta should have been charged with false statements, yet nobody charged him. And why? Because bias played a role. I understand when you have an investigation, you like to give a little something to both sides, makes you feel good. You gave us hundreds of pages of bias. But the conclusion was just, I'm sorry, whether it was subconscious or conscious, you had a little throwaway to go to the Democrats. But the fact is, bias is all the way through this, and I'm sorry that you were not able to see that with what is very obvious from your evidence.
Thank you for your unbiased way that you conducted this comprehensive report, and just for the rest of the team at large that's probably back at DOJ watching this, and so I want to get right to the heart of the matter. One of the concerns I have when we look at bias in the analysis that you made at the very end, it is incumbent upon any team to make sure that they do the investigation without bias. And it's clear that Peter Strzok and Lisa Page had some bias. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so if you were to learn that they had a disproportionate role in the investigation, both on this investigation and the Russia investigation, that would mean that their bias would have a disproportionate contribution to that decision, would that not?
Yeah, and I'm going to stick to this review since I know this one at this point, but yes,
All right,
that would be a concern.
So let me go further. You're the one that actually discovered the text messages.
That's correct.
Your forensic team.
Correct.
So why would the FBI not have been able to find that?
So,
Did they look?
well, the first batch
Yeah,
we
but-
recovered in 2017,
Right.
we found because we asked for text messages.
All right, and so they produced them
They
to you.
produced them to us.
All
Then
right.
we
So the ones
asked
that
for
you
more.
found forensically,
Correct.
why did they not find those?
If you didn't do the forensic work on the phones, you wouldn't have found the
So
text messages.
So they
on
really
the phone.
just didn't look, is what you're saying. The
Nobody
FBI
had
didn't
looked
look.
beforehand. Correct.
So you looked, but they didn't look.
They hadn't looked.
So was it a lack of curiosity on their part? I mean,
I think
because
you'd have
you're the
to ask
one.
the FBI on that as to why they didn't.
Well, but if
make
they
that
were
effort.
really serious about oversight and really serious with the confines of these text messages, I think an investigator would want to know if they had bias within their own agency, wouldn't you?
Yes, and I would just add, we've had those phones in our custody for probably about a year now, or 6 months now. So just to be clear, we've had them for the last 6
Since then. Well, you've done a lot more with them than they did, and I'll give you that. And so I want to focus on what's not in the report, because as we look at what's not in the report is, as you know, the intelligence community, IG, actually was part of the predication for this investigation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
They were so concerned that there might have been foreign infiltration into this that they went immediately to the FBI to let them know about that. Is that correct?
I know they went to them. I don't know the sort of.
Well, I talked to the IG, and he indicated that he went literally that day, got in a car, went over and met. And so he was really concerned that there was some anomalies in the metadata that would suggest that a foreign actor was getting copies of potential emails. Are you aware of that?
I am, and I've talked to him as well.
Okay. And so if they are that concerned, do you not find it curious that the FBI investigators, Peter Strzok and his team, did not ever talk to them other than that initial meeting where they did that? Would you think that part of an investigation would be to go back to the very people that brought up the accusation and say, what did you find?
Yeah, I assume that would be what.
But that's not in your report.
That's correct.
And they didn't do that, did they?
I'd have to double check that.
Yeah, I can tell you that the last time that they talked to them was when they gave the referral to close it out after the Comey incident. So wouldn't you find that curious, that they wouldn't have looked any further?
If they didn't, yes.
All right, and so you can get back to the committee on
Yes.
that. All right, so let me go on a little bit further. So if they didn't look, and if we don't have that information, your staff indicated that indeed emails with at least some classified information did go to a foreign entity or a third party.
Yes, one of the individuals who was on Secretary Clinton's staff, his email account, private email account, Gmail account, was hacked.
Right, and so let me look at 4 other things that I need you some clarification, because there's some text messages. We know that Peter Strzok worked on both the Russia and the Hillary investigation, so I want to make sure that these text messages don't apply to Hillary. So on July the 29th, before the investigation into the Russia investigation started, there was a text message that says, do you want us to reach out to Gervais? And I think they're referring to Gervais Griggs at that particular point. And they said, well, why do you want to do that? Well, we want to see if he actually has the names that we already have. Now, I'm troubled by this a little bit. Did that apply to the Hillary Clinton investigation? It was already closed.
It was already closed. I'd have to go back and double check.
Okay,
that.
why I'm curious is why would they be checking with someone who his specialty is, quote, FBI advanced electronic surveillance? Why would he be checking before a Russian investigation is open with somebody who does essentially bugging and monitoring to find out anything that might have been going on? Why would that have happened?
I don't know.
Okay. So let me go on a little bit further then. The text message that says the White House is running this, which happened on August 5th. Was that in reference to Russia or Hillary Clinton?
Our assumption and understanding was it was not Hillary Clinton's matter because that had been closed already.
That's my assumption as well. And the one that says that the president wants to know everything about this that happened on September 2nd, was that with Hillary or with the Russia investigation?
Our understanding is that would not have been Hillary, that would have been the Russia matter.
Yeah, so looking at the difference between the way that the Hillary Clinton investigation was notified and researched versus the way that it appears that the Russia investigation, did the administration, the previous administration, take an abnormal interest in all of that?
The gentleman's time has expired, Mr. Inspector General, but you may answer.
I don't know the answer to that at this point because that was not part of this review, but certainly it's something as we look at the matters that have been recently referred to us, we will be considering.
Refresh my recollection. We know who Lisa Page is. She sent all these bad text messages about Donald Trump, but we don't know who FBI agents 1 through 5 are. Why the disparate treatment?
So when we write up our report, we apply Privacy Act and other laws to decide whose name we can disclose and whose name on balance we think is a legal matter we can't. That's why you see some names in here and some names anonymized. We have the request from the committee. As I mentioned, we sought to get approval from the FBI to send that information forward.
What was the reason the FBI gave you as to why we couldn't learn who FBI agents 1 through 5 are?
They mentioned a couple of reasons, but the primary reason was that because those individuals, 2 of them were agents, one's a lawyer, work on counterintelligence matters, they had a security and safety.
Peter Strzok worked on counterintelligence matters, and we know who he is.
That's correct.
Why the disparate treatment?
I'm just telling you what was reported to us, and, as I've...
Who's attorney number 2?
I have to think about who that is, but I'd want to make sure that what I was saying wasn't putting someone in jeopardy or at risk. And
What was the reason the FBI gave for not telling us who attorney number 2 is?
same reason, that individual works on counterintelligence matters and safety and security reasons, as well as some other reasons.
What were they? I want to
have to
obtain
go
the full
back.
universe of reasons because, I feel as though sunshine, transparency will be the way to root out this bias that we seem to see reflected. Are you familiar with the resistance movement in this country?
I am familiar with it from looking at some of these text messages, but I am not personally
What's your general
familiar with it.
understanding of what that movement is?
I just could tell you what it says here, somehow, resist what's going on in the country in terms of the government, governance. I have no real personal knowledge.
Does it mean
of
resist Donald Trump? Resist his presidency?
That's my understanding, certainly as it was played out here.
So you've got Peter Strzok, who goes from the Hillary Clinton email investigation to the FBI Trump-Russia investigation to the Mueller probe. You've got Lisa Page, who goes from the Hillary Clinton email investigation to the FBI Russia investigation to the Mueller probe. And then you have attorney number 2, who similarly goes from the Hillary Clinton email investigation to the Trump-Russia investigation to the Mueller probe. It seems like a very bizarre coincidence that the way people tended to end up on the Mueller probe was some association with Hillary Clinton, whether it was the people I just identified or whether it was Andrew Weissman, who attended Hillary Clinton's election night party, or whether it was Jeannie Rhee, who had defended the Clinton Foundation in FOIA defenses. It seems so bizarre that the people you would go and accumulate to prosecute the President of the United States and investigate him would be so intertangled with these fact patterns regarding Hillary Clinton. Does that strike you as odd?
I don't know if it strikes me as odd, other than I know it as to the 3 individuals you mentioned occurred.
Is that usual for someone who's like directly tied element of a fact pattern to then migrate over to these other
It's
investigations?
an excellent point, Congressman. We actually make that here as well, that from a management matter, having done corruption cases, you wouldn't put someone who just investigated an individual on one side to go investigate the other person.
Who made those
My
staffing decisions?
Would have been the leadership of the FBI.
So it would have been James Comey who's been fired. It would have been Andrew McCabe, who has been referred for criminal prosecution as a consequence of your good work. Attorney number 2 says, "Viva la resistance," while actively investigating President Trump. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
And does it trouble you that someone who was tasked with investigating the president was associating himself with a resistance movement against the very same president?
I'll say what I said earlier. I don't care who that person was investigating. That person should not be making comments about an individual or related to a person they're investigating or the FBI is working on.
Well, it will be totally unacceptable to my constituents to say that there was a person who went from the Hillary Clinton email investigation to the Trump-Russia investigation to the Mueller probe, who identified himself and who you identified as the lead FBI lawyer on the Mueller probe, and we don't get to know who that person is, associating with the resistance, going after the president after this totally botched Hillary Clinton email investigation that you've appropriately highlighted. In this country, we cannot live in a world where unelected people at the FBI get to shelter someone who I believe was actively working against the president and actively associating and identifying with a movement that is intended to frustrate everything that this president is trying to do. So I hope we get that information, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Mr. Horowitz, I want to come back to something we talked about earlier, the disclosure of FBI Attorney 1 and FBI Attorney 2. And you said, I think I'm correct, that they did not want that divulged because they actually worked in counterintelligence. Is that correct?
That's what we were told by the FBI.
Okay, but you know who the people are.
Correct.
And I would say, based on your report, I know who they are. And what I guess I'm concerned about is you know that they don't work for the counterintelligence division.
Well, two of the agents do.
I'm talking about attorneys.
There's one lawyer who's in here, so there are 5 people total.
Right.
Paige Strzok, 2 other agents.
But
and
you
an
had a
attorney.
dialogue between FBI Attorney 1 and 2.
Correct.
And those 2 attorneys, do they not work for Trish Anderson?
Those 2 attorneys work in the Office of General Counsel.
Yeah. And
where-
so would one of those attorneys be Sally Moyer?
I'm going to defer to what the FBI
But they don't work in
requested from them.
counterintelligence. I mean, if that's the reason the FBI is giving, they're giving you false information because they work
Well,
for the general
let me just
counsel.
add, they were talking
Is
about.
the other one Kevin Kleinsmith?
They were talking about the other attorney there that we have their text messages
Right.
in here that they were concerned about, along with the other 2. I'm not here to articulate the FBI's interest. We oversee
Well,
the FBI.
we're going to get to the bottom of it, like Mr. Comer was talking about. And I think the other thing that I would ask you to look into, there is growing evidence that 302s were edited and changed. And it gets back to what Ms. Handel said in terms of those particular interview sessions. And those 302s, it is suggested that they were changed to either prosecute or not prosecute individuals. And that is very troubling. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
And
Gentlemen-
if I could just mention, we have been getting those kind of referrals, and as often happens when we issue reports like this, we get other information coming to us, and we are intending to follow up on that. But I just want to reassure you and the committee, I'm here to let you know what we're being told by the FBI is their concerns. Obviously, Director Wray and the leadership of the FBI and ourselves, I'm certainly not looking to step aside, but on this, but it is their interests that they need to be articulated to the committee.
I'd like everyone here to think about, what if the shoe was on their foot? What if high-ranking people in the nation's most important law enforcement organization were talking about an investigation into them, and they showed that kind of animus, that kind of bias in the process? You, Mr. Horowitz, have a number of times today made it very clear that you understand how important it is that the American people have the assurance that when it comes to the enforcement of our laws, that justice is blind, and that the guarantee of our Constitution of equality under the law for all people is fulfilled. I don't think we can say that here right now, unfortunately, about this very sorry circumstance. And we're going to continue to pursue this until we have the assurance that the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice have cleaned house and are making the necessary changes to ensure that in the future, whether it's the 2020 presidential election or whether it's Jane Doe or Joe Smith's criminal investigation, that they will indeed experience equality under the law, and the kind of extreme bias that we've seen in looking at some of the most prominent investigations in American history will not happen again.
Mr. Gosar, a moment ago, referred to a member on our side of the aisle as, quote, ranting and raving, speaking out of both sides of her mouth. I ask that his words be taken down.
Well, I'm not going to instruct the gentleman from Arizona to apologize any more than I am other members who today have also said things that came precipitously close to the line. I will ask the gentleman from Arizona, if I may, continue. If I may continue, I will ask the gentleman from Arizona if he wishes to rephrase or restate his comments in any way, or to make clear that he wasn't directing
Thank you,
them
Mr.
toward
Chairman.
the
I was acknowledging
colleague.
that the other side has been ranting and raving about issues that are not pertinent to today's hearing, and that's what I was confronting, not just one individual person.
So it was a general comment as opposed to one directly, specifically directed at an individual colleague? Gentleman from New York still wish to?
Well, as long as it's clear that he was talking in general political terms and not about an individual. Okay.
I think it's pretty clear.